All right, so thank you all for being here. I'm really excited for today's talk. I think pricing is something I didn't really think about in my past, especially kind of just getting started. But I think obviously it's one of the most important things. It's how we make money. It's how we kind of continue to make money. So I think it's a valuable kind of thing to revisit, even if you've been in the industry for a while, or especially for somebody who's just getting started. I'm extremely excited to announce Andy. Thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to hear from you today. And yeah, without further ado, you can go ahead and kind of jump into your presentation.
Fantastic. Well, hey, thanks everybody for taking the time out of your busy day. I know it's a busy time of year, especially for folks in our line of work. So I'm so glad that you're here, and I hope I can provide a little value for you. As France said, today we're here to talk about how to price your product. And one thing that I've found in my journey in being a pricing consultant is and building a pricing company is that pricing touches every single aspect of a business. So whether you work in product, whether you work in business development or finance, everybody has to think about price. It's one of these universal questions. So I won't be able to tell you today how to price your individual product, but hopefully I can help put you in the right direction and start thinking in a value-based way. So this is all about me. I'm the co-founder of a company called Price Theory. We help take the guesswork out of pricing, but I'm not here today to sell you anything, just to be super transparent. I'm just here to provide value. We love DevRev, and we really want to really help bring some value to this community. And so that's why I'm here. So if you have questions on pricing, things like that, you can absolutely jump in and ask while I'm midstream, but also I'll do Q&A at the end too. And that's usually the really rich part of these presentations as well. So I'm from New York City. I'm in New York City right now. And formerly in my past life, I was in marketing. So I was the CMO of a restaurant chain, and I did product marketing as well before that. I've also been an instructor at NYU, and I've worked with some pretty big name clients in my career history from all sorts of different industries. So it's pretty broad. And what I've seen between all of those things is that there is kind of this universal rules of pricing. And so that's what I'm here to discuss today. I like to start by saying that pricing is a judgment problem, not a math problem. And I'll show you why. Hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll be convinced that it's not just something for a calculator to do, but a very important strategic decision that needs to be revisited on an ongoing basis. Here's some fun facts about pricing. So 85% of companies have suboptimal pricing strategies. That's according to Bain & Company. So if you are feeling like you're not super confident in your own pricing, you are not alone. Most companies are feeling that way. On average, companies that make intentional pricing decisions can double their revenue over 5 years. So companies that do this regularly and intentionally stand to gain quite a bit more money over even a short term like 5 years. 50% of companies leave money on the table with poor price setting. And this one is my favorite as a former marketer. Pricing is 4 times more efficient in improving revenue as it is to optimize your acquisition. So your growth marketing, your Google ads, that sort of thing. If you a dollar spent there is 4 times more efficient spent in pricing. So one of the things that is often associated with pricing, people ask me, how do I get my price lower? But it's not necessarily about that, because consumer behavior often defies rudimentary economic models. And this applies to any time that you're selling to a human being. So whether or not that's a B2C business, a B2B business, B2B2C, whatever acronym you like, you will always be subject to cognitive biases. And this is one. Conventional wisdom tells us that a lower price means that you will sell more volume. You've got your standard downward sloping curve there that you learned in Economics 101. And this theory is true and holds under the assumptions that simplify that model. But when you look in the real world, it often defies this convention. I look at an example of two very similar products. On the left side, I know it's a little early in the morning to be thinking about vodka, but here we are. On the left side, we have Pinnacle Vodka. It is a blue bottle. It has mountains in the background. It's full of vodka. It's got a French flag on it. It's imported. It's got a sticker on it that says high rated. This is good stuff. And on the right, we have Grey Goose. Again, blue bottle. Mountains in the background, French flag, it's imported, all these indicators of high quality. So what's the difference? And even when you look inside the bottle at the actual product itself, it's not too uncommon for these products like this to come from the same sort of vodka concentrate on the inside. So even in a blind taste test, these things might end up being actually very similar. So I bet you know what's coming next. The difference is in the price tag. And so remember, conventional wisdom is telling us the lower the price, the more you will sell. But when you actually look at the data, we're looking at a very small market share on the left at $17 and almost 100-fold higher on the right with the price that's twice as high. So lower price does not always mean more volume. What is going on here? Why is this happening? How can a higher price let you sell more? Well, what's happening is that price is the strongest indicator of quality. What is happening is on that shelf, the price tag is shouting to your primordial brain and saying, hey, this one is actually better. So price defines the value that your product is worth, not the other way around. Inherent value, it's the same thing inside the bottle, more or less. Inherent value is not the driver. It is price that is telling you how much this is worth. So pricing optimization can have a huge impact on increasing profits, as we showed before. And it's all about finding a better price. It's not necessarily a lower price or a higher price. It's about finding a better price that aligns with the expectations of your buyer. It doesn't matter if you're B2B or B2C. This applies to everything. So I'm going to talk about some normal ways of setting price. The first one is cost plus. This is pretty standard. You sell it for more than you're making it for, and you pick your desired margin. You say cost of goods plus X, and that's it. It's very internally focused. It doesn't really require market research. Doesn't take into account your competitor strategies. And it's quick and easy. But the downside is that this is pretty inefficient. It doesn't really take into account that value equation that is saying that price is indicating how good you are. And you could be leaving a lot of money on the table by doing this. So I don't typically recommend cost plus if you can avoid it. Also in B2B scenarios, and I imagine quite a few of you are working at B2B companies here, you might not have a firm cost of goods. It might be low or zero marginal cost for what you're selling. So where does this price come from? It's very difficult to say in those scenarios. The next is competitor-based pricing. This is choosing your price based on what your competitors are using. It's focused on what the market says your price should be. It's pretty simple. It's also low risk, but it does come with some downsides. You still haven't really assessed the value signal to your customer. And one of the things is, if you're going to copy their homework, you had better assume that they're doing it right. But we know that 85% of companies are not using good pricing strategies, do not have confidence in their own answers. So why would you want to copy their homework? Another aspect in the B2B world is that prices are often opaque. You have to do a whole sales conversation, or maybe it's a solution sale where it's many small pieces coming together. It's not easy to find a one-for-one comparison. So there's some downsides in this model as well. So as you can imagine, I like to advocate for value-based pricing. This is matching your price to the value that you create for your customer. So this is using real data, and when done right, it can improve your relationship with your customers because there's a clear, fair exchange of value happening. The upside is that this is more informed decision-making, and you can build relationships with your customers. The downside is that this requires time and resources, and it's not a math problem at the end of the day. I'll show you how to do value-based pricing, and you'll see very quickly why this is not a math problem. So in this framework, we look at a pricing thermometer. We start with your cost of goods that could be zero or somewhere close to zero or whatever it is. And we want to move up this thermometer. So where we want to identify is that value at the top of the thermometer. This is the amount of utility that the customer gains. That can be economic value, that can be time saving, that can be showing off a good brand, many different ways of getting value depending on what you sell in your business. But the tricky part is that for every individual, this value amount is going to be different. Every individual firm that you sell to in a B2B scenario, or every individual consumer is going to have a slightly different value. So this is a non-exact estimate at the top. But in between, somewhere hopefully between your cost of goods and where that value sits, is your pricing zone. This is where you can conceivably set your price. You wouldn't want to go above value, or you won't make a sale. So this is really where you ought to be. Also, we want to take into account where our competitors are. What's that reference point that people already have in their mind for what's fair? So everything below the competition is reference value. Say, oh, I'm cheaper than the leader. I'm cheaper than most other things. And everything above the competition, above that reference point, says that you're better than your competition. And your way of saying that you're better and more valuable than your competitor is not just with your marketing, is not just with your value proposition, it's with your price point to indicate in a very subconscious way of saying that you are higher quality than your competition. So you want to make sure that you understand this reference point as well in this equation. Now, somewhere, let's say you've got a superior product, as I hope you all do, you will price slightly higher than your competition to say, hey, we're a little bit better, but not out of the realm of norms. You're getting value above that, and we are getting value as a firm because we get to keep everything over what it costs us to make this thing. So how do we measure customer value? Well, like I said, everybody thinks about this value differently, and it really depends on what you're selling. Just because a product is X% more effective does not necessarily mean that it's worth X% more. There are factors like monetary value, your total cost savings, your income enhancements, it's time saving, it's faster, it's better, it's stronger. There's psychological value. There's innate value coming from your brand and your social status and your experience that you have. So here are a couple methodologies that we can do. The first methodology that is very popular in the consumer packaged goods world is conjoint. This is where you look at different randomized bundles and you're able to understand the impact on price. This is a pretty complicated methodology. It requires machine learning to figure it out, but it is very precise in the answer, trying to understand that top of that pricing thermometer. Another way, and this is often used for new products or in B2B settings, is a Van Westendorp methodology. This method came about because asking your customer, what are you willing to pay, will often get you incorrect results. People will say lower than they actually are willing to pay. So this methodology allows you to ask a few different ways. What price is too expensive? What price is too cheap? what price is expensive and what price is cheap. By asking it 4 ways, you can understand where you sort of can start to understand where your value is at the top of that thermometer. So by asking these questions, you can get a sense for where value sits at the top, and you can start to understand where these different important points are. You've got your cost, your competitive reference, and the value at the top. And based on those 3 pieces of information and how good you are, you can start to set your own price that way. But at the end of the day, it is unexact. It is a judgment problem of where you think you can compete in the market and where you can provide value to your customers, as much as it is figuring out what that end number is. So pricing is a strategic challenge, not necessarily a math challenge. A lot of folks that I speak with are in B2B. So I like to address some B2B value drivers really quick. When I consult with a business firm, I look at 5 different types of value. Time and efficiency saving, replacing something that the company might want to build for themselves, reducing a risk like a lawsuit or product failure, creating new revenue for that company, or a direct savings like a coupon on your electricity bill. And so these are 5 categories of value that you can get often in a B2B sale. One thing I like to talk about, though, is when you are doing that sale, you don't necessarily want to talk about your product. You want to talk about your value. There is a saying that says you don't buy a drill, you buy a hole in the wall. And so by focusing on the value that you create for your customers, you can hopefully communicate that more effectively and make that sale more effectively. And so, you look at value drivers like these when you're speaking about your value. So you can go and quantify those things. And this is a little bit of what I help folks do at Price Theory, is looking across those 5 levers, actually estimating what is the economic value for your target customer, and figuring out, here are the things that you should be saying, like, we're going to save you time, or we're going to get you new customers, or we're going to reduce a risk, and figure out and kind of rank order where those things sit. And it starts to become a prioritization exercise in how you develop products, in how you develop your marketing, all of these central things to getting and keeping customers. I often get asked questions about acquisition model. And oftentimes this pricing model can be more important than your price point itself. It's all about finding out when you can deliver that value message, once the value of what you are offering becomes apparent. So we can look all the way on the right at a bag of M&Ms that you buy in the store. You're going to have a very low time to value because you're going to eat that bag of M&Ms right away. Okay, great. So you can pay your price up front. I know what this is going to taste like. I know I'm going to enjoy it. I can have it right now. The value is right there very, very quickly, as is the case often in the consumer goods industry. But when you start to get into B2B sales, your time to value really stretches out. So things that you'll learn to love, like, let's say, Adobe products that you have to learn how to use them and fold them into your everyday working to really understand the value, those are often good for a free trial. So you get to try that out and really experience the value with the time limit, of course, so that you can understand why this is valuable. Then you can look at even freemium categories, things like Calendly or Slack. Slack uses a reverse free trial, but in both instances, these are things that you may not be core to what you do, but it is really helpful with certain tasks. And the more you use it and the more people you use it with, the more valuable it becomes. So you want to have that pricing conversation maybe a month or 2 months into using the actual product itself and incorporate some upsells along with it. But again, it's not apparent how this will be valuable until you experience it, and how long does it take you to experience that value. I've been speaking with sales leaders and RevOps leaders recently and doing customer research of my own. And one of the valuable points of wisdom that I picked up was, you don't even want to talk about price until your third, especially if you're selling a long enterprise sale. You want to have your third, fourth, maybe even fifth conversation, and then you bring up your price, because you need to show them how it will be valuable and make sure all your stakeholders understand the value too. And then you bring up price after your value has become readily apparent. If you lead with price, sometimes it can be kind of a sticker shock, a false start. I often also get asked about price tiers. A lot of people think that they have to use price tiers because that's the norm. But I do want to help everybody here understand why this is the norm and in which scenarios a price tier is appropriate and which it is not. I think it's a little bit of an overused tactic at this point. So we want to understand why it has, when it can be appropriately used. The first example is when you have two very distinct segments. Let's say you're Adobe, you're selling to university students, and you're selling to large enterprise businesses that are going to be using this. Those are two very distinct segments with two very different price sensitivities and willingness to pay, and also in how they will use the product. So if you've got two very different value delivery systems and two very different customers, this is a good instance to use price segments, use price tiers. And it can, if you're really, really strict, it can stop there. But there are some kind of pricing page scenarios in which you might want to use this. See the low, medium, high price. And essentially what you're doing on that page is something like this. I'll tell you the story of the last time I bought a TV. So I walk into Best Buy, or click onto your pricing page, let's say as the analogy. You walk into Best Buy and the first thing you see in the TV section is the most beautiful, crisp, vivid TV. It's gigantic. It's got all the bells and whistles. It's the best thing ever. And you say, wow, what a great TV. This is everything I wanted. And you look at the price tag and it says it's $8,000. Okay, well, maybe that's a little bit more than I wanted to spend on a TV. It's a little bit outside my price range. It's probably in the top of my willingness to pay, but I'm anchored in that price. And then over the shoulder of that TV, right in the back wall, you see a few other TVs that are not quite as good. It's maybe not as sharp a picture, maybe not as vivid, but it's the right size and it looks pretty good. And so you go back there and you say, oh, this one is only $6,000. Well, compared to the $8,000 TV, I think that's pretty reasonable. I'll go for that one. And so what has happened in that scenario is called anchoring. I've been anchored in the high price of $8,000, so that $6,000 doesn't seem like such a bad deal. If all the prices were $6,000 flat, then you would be competing in other ways, and maybe you would lose some customers by presenting that price up front. So you're kind of manipulating the internal psychology by doing this. And you can anchor in a higher price. You can anchor in a lower price too. You ever go into a car dealership, they say it's $40,000. Oh, but you want the mud flaps and you want the cup holders and all that stuff. And it ends up being $45,000. They've anchored you in a lower price and then they kind of edge you up. Same idea though. Your anchoring sets the expectation for that next price. And that's what you're doing on your pricing page. So there's a lot of usability experts out there. Well, and there's a quantitative case for showing that if you use this tactic on your pricing page, it can help you increase revenue. I want to caveat that by saying it's case dependent, and you should deploy this strategically and understand kind of why you're doing it if you're going to do it, not just because you feel you have to. There's also a hidden downside, because when you're looking at this Best Buy, you've got 3 different TV brands here, maybe even 4, that you have to service, that your salespeople have to understand on the floor, that you're going to have a separate SKU in your system to check out and deal with. There are hidden operational costs to having multiple prices. Yes, it can help edge up your revenue in some cases and your conversion, but there is a very real trade-off that probably doesn't happen in your department. It happens in customer success. It happens in sales, happens in finance when you have to account for all these things. There are some hidden trade-offs that come with this tactic. So before you deploy it, I urge you all to consider the pros and cons. More to the idea of anchoring, there's a very powerful example from JCPenney. We know that this is kind of a failed retailer for a number of reasons, but one of them includes price. So they tried this very famous pricing experiment where before they had offered 50% off discounts. So it was a $50 shirt that became $25. They're anchored in $50, and wow, what a good deal! It's half off. I'm getting a high value item for a good price. They ended these sales and switched to an everyday low prices model. So now that $25 shirt isn't a bargain, it's just kind of a $25 shirt. It lost that price frame, it lost that anchor point. And the customers no longer perceived the value as being very high. Everything in the store suddenly became less valuable. And as a result, they had a sales drop. Maybe not fully attributable to this, but it had a huge impact on sales. So let's see, I'm just going through some other kind of B2B cases, right? There's pricing mechanisms creating incentives. I often get asked, usage-based is becoming very popular. Charging per user is very popular. When you do things like that, it can work, help you extract more value from your potential client, but also it creates a negative incentive. So if you are charging per user, there's an incentive to share your password. I'll give an example. Normally, if we were in person, I would ask you to raise your hand, but consider, do you share a Netflix password? A lot of people do. You're right. So I'm one of them. And so by setting that up, it creates an incentive to share passwords and kind of game the system a little bit. Now, is $10 a month something that I could afford and would be willing to pay? Yes. But I'm incentivized to share my password anyway. Another one is usage-based. This is becoming really, really popular. And what happens when you charge, let's say, per minute on your cell phone bill? When you're charging per minute on your cell phone bill, like when I was a kid, it didn't matter if you could afford it, if it was 5 cents a minute or whatever it was. You wanted to hang up that phone as fast as possible. Hi, Grandma, I'm great. Got to hang up now because it's going to be charged more. Goodbye. It doesn't even matter if you could afford it. You want to ration that usage because you know that you're being charged in that way. So what you want to look for with a pricing mechanism, and this is not always the case, but you want to find a way that you can have symmetrical incentives. So the more you use it, the more value you get. So if you're like a brokerage, saying the more you buy, and we're able to connect you for, you're able to make more money, or by deliverable, that incentivizes more purchases, things like that. We shouldn't charge per user or by usage just because we feel we have to. You should look at the incentives that creates and make a strategic decision of whether or not you can handle the trade-offs of that incentive. Oftentimes, I like to advocate for simple flat pricing. It's kind of a cop-out to charge per user, kind of a cop-out to charge by usage, because that just says, I haven't really thought about how to price this thing. So really, really consider the incentives, and they are not rational. This is not rational incentives, not based on what you can actually afford or what you're willing to pay. It's just a deep psychological thing that's happening. And yes, even with businesses. So I'm going to leave you with some parting wisdom. Just to summarize, is that pricing is a judgment problem. It is not a math problem. And hopefully I've proven that to you today. Price is the greatest indicator of quality, and good pricing is good marketing. Like I said, pricing touches every aspect of your organization, whether it's finance, product, sales, customer success, and marketing as well. When you've got a good price, it makes all of those functions do their job better. And lastly, there are lots of complicated tactics you can use, but they often come with hidden costs and trade-offs. So keep it simple. Complicated models can add hidden costs. Thank you very much. I have a mailing list that I use occasionally. If you want to, this is the QR code in the bottom left corner, or you can just send me an email if you ever want to chat. I'm always happy to talk about pricing. I say on my website, I just do like free consults all the time. I like to provide value up front. So if you ever have any questions, I'm here to chat. And at this point in the talk, I usually hand it over to just Q&A, because I'm sure some of you have some burning questions, or you say, wait, no, that's wrong. I want to argue with you about that. That happens too. I'm super happy to have a dialogue about it. So I will pause and open the floor up to questions. And if you're feeling shy, you can put it in the chat as well. And I'm happy to take it there too. I think B2 Storefront has a question. You can just shout it out. You can just say.
Audio's coming through.
Oh yeah, now you're can't quite hear you. If you want to put it in the chat, I'll read out your question as well. Okay, for B2B SaaS, how do you frame your price when competitors don't show your price? This is a very common question I get, and a very common scenario. So thank you for asking, and thank you for going first. So when your competitors don't show your price, show their price, it can be difficult to figure out what that benchmark of being reasonable is. And so when you look at something like the pricing thermometer, you're basically going into it with a missing data point of understanding what is reasonable to charge based on your competitors. But that's not the only piece of information you need to do value-based pricing. The real and most important part of value-based pricing is understanding the top of that thermometer. Where does the value sit, and where can I take a fair share of that value? So even if your competitors don't do it, I assume you're also unique in your space. So you're going to be providing a unique value anyway. It's more important to talk to your customers and understand their needs and understand the economic value that you create for them. That can be the only data point you have, but that's the most important one to understand. So talk to your customers would be my short answer. The next person says, I sell a desktop app to developers, and it's really hard to convince developers of the value because they literally compare it to Spotify and Netflix instead of their hourly rate or market value. How to approach that? So it seems like there is a struggle of your target customer comparing you to the wrong competitors. They see you as an entertainment rather than something that's going to help them with their work profitability. This may not necessarily be a direct pricing question, but it is a strategic framing question. This might be a marketing challenge where it's important for you to go right out the gate and say, you'll save this much time in your work, and make sure that you're framing it very well. And if they are pulling out of their own head, here's where I'm going to compare it. You can preempt them, and you can say, consider a Salesforce or Excel or whatever tool that you're using for your productivity. Here we are. And so you name your competitors first and you anchor them in that space rather than in where they are doing. So you can use the tools of pricing to help you with that marketing challenge as well. I hope that answers your question. Let's see. The next one is our clients want, great. Our clients want to their demo calls after being shocked by their pricing found our products. So I think this is about kind of sequencing where you put your demo and when you have your pricing conversation. So it's kind of like a general rule. You need to demonstrate your value before you have your price up front necessarily, because you can have that sticker shock. And I've worked with RevOps leaders that are using value-based pricing, and they'll often come right out the gate and say, okay, well, I've done the calculation. You should want to pay this price. And maybe they will, but they haven't experienced the value. And so while you can say to them, hey, you're going to save this much time, and I know it's going to cost you this much money, so this is a good deal for you, it can be difficult to realize that value. And so that's why having a demo or building a custom thing, showing a little bit of early value in a software sale can be really, really effective. So that you don't just hear about the value. It's kind of like a don't take it from me, here, use it and see how great it is, or watch it in action and see how great it is. Can't you imagine yourself using this and saving this much time? Then introducing the idea of price. So this is just making sure that your value is really apparent before you introduce the idea of price. That can be instantaneous. Like if you're going to buy a head of lettuce, you know exactly what this is going to do. You know what it's going to taste like. You're going to eat it right away. Done. That can be a very short amount of time, or it can be a very long amount of time if there are a lot of stakeholders and it's a complicated option to sell. Let's see. P2 Storefront says, I agree with Killian. And cost of mass utilities like Spotify is also pushing the ChatGPT price tag. They put $42 where it could easily cost $400 by the value it provides. It would be cheap and a no-brainer purchase. So I think what this is going to say is this is actually getting at a point of, why is ChatGPT charging $42 when they could put a zero on the end of that price for some businesses? This is also kind of a go-to-market strategy. So this is a little bit of, we want to create wide adoption of this new type of tool and introduce it in a way that is very low barrier for people to use, so that they understand the value, but also that it becomes the norm to use. So this is kind of a rare exception of a very different breakthrough technology. And they want to get mass usage as much as they want to make revenue at this point, because they're kind of doing the blitz scaling strategy. I hope that kind of addresses that point as well. Brant says, how does frequent less charges in pricing have impact on customer sentiments? This is a really good question, right? How often should you update your price? What does this do when you change your price? I'm scared that people will be mad at me for changing my price. And I often get asked this question. How do you successfully navigate a price change, whether that's going up or down? People tend to really like when your price is going down, so they don't ask a lot of questions. But when your price goes up, it's really, really important to give a clear justification as to why, especially in a relationship business like software. So if you are working with customer relationships, it's going to be important to justify your price increase and give maybe even some advanced notice. Say, hey, this is coming in 2 months. We are increasing our prices because of XYZ reason, but we really value your partnership and just wanted to give you a heads up. And more times than not, doing this type of communication of being open and transparent and in partnership with your clients, it strengthens the relationship. And it says, oh, wow, we're really in this together. This is something, we're working to solve this problem and we care about our partnership. And so it can actually have a positive effect if you handle it correctly with your communication. I like to advocate for transparent and well in advance changes to pricing. People can start to game that system if you give them too much notice. But for the most part, especially we're talking yearly contracts, we're talking software, it can be a very strong thing. I've actually been in scenarios where working as a retail executive, we raised our prices with no notice very suddenly, and nobody really complained. Also, so you would be surprised at how you're thinking about that conventional wisdom again. Higher price means lower volume, but sometimes that doesn't happen. And sometimes actually when you raise your price, it's a good excuse to talk about what you're doing, and that has an ancillary effect of getting more business. Or sometimes you fit your customer value better with a higher price, and it's signaling that you're higher quality now, and you'll get more customers. There are a lot of famous examples of this. Peloton is one that I can think of. They raised their price dramatically and saw a huge increase in their sales because they had that product market fit at that level. So it's all about getting a better price. And if you're going to raise your price, evaluate where that will impact your customer relationships, and you can actually use it as an excuse to get in touch and strengthen that relationship. Another question is, what are some simple changes that you have seen that make a big difference? So some simple changes, not necessarily, it's difficult to be prescriptive for every business scenario, but a really simple thing you can do is talk to your customer. Whenever I enter a new engagement or work with a new business or start a new job or whatever it is, I always start by talking to the customer to understand them better. And there is no substitute for a one-on-one, face-to-face conversation, not a survey, but actually looking them in the eye and seeing all of the communication that's happening, not just their direct answers. And it could be as simple a conversation as, hey, what's working for you and what's not working for you? And if you engage, that can be 30 minutes, So it's really, it's a simple thing to do, but in those sorts of qualitative scenarios, you'll find that you'll discover things that you didn't know to ask. And you'll find out those unknown unknowns. So it's really, really important to have those conversations with your customers so that you can understand in advance what are those things that you didn't even know, completely going against your preconceived notions, and understanding that value. So that's a simple thing you can do. If there are any other burning questions, you can put them in the chat. I'll continue to read them out, hang out. And I'll put my email here too. If you'd like to get in touch, say hello at pricetheory.ai. Happy to chat if you're feeling shy about the chat here as well.
Well, thank you so much for coming and talking with us today. I think we all kind of took something away from it, or a lot away from it, I should say. But yeah, it was definitely insightful for me, and I thought about a lot of things that I hadn't really thought about before. So yeah, thank you again for your time, and thank you all for being here. If you want to check out our pricing model, you can go to devrev.ai. We offer 1,000 free credits, big time. And yeah, you can definitely go ahead and get started and see our value and kind of learn from us. So yeah, but thanks again for being here. It's always great to see y'all, and stay tuned for our next talk.